this video, I will reveal the secrets of David Copperfield's portal illusion. Here's a quick recap of what happened. David begins the trick by reading a letter written by Russell Brown, requesting that David send his son Michael to Hawaii so they can meet. He then invites Michael on stage to join him for the trick. After a brief exchange, David informs Michael his father's wish was for him to visit Hawaii, and he will take a photo of Michael there as a gift for his dad. The scene shifts to a live feed of a beach on an island in Hawaii, where David's assistant Brad is standing by. David then addresses potential skeptics.
There's going to be a lot of critical people, cynics, who are going to say, this can't be real, don't insult my intelligence. Well, this is not about intelligence, it's illusion.
To prove that everything is real and random, David throws a ball into the audience. The person who catches it is asked to close their eyes and throw it again, ensuring a random selection of participants. Eventually, a man stands up and introduces himself as T.S. David asks T.S. to select two other random audience members. He then writes his initials on David's arm as proof, and the chosen random participants take part in signing a group photograph of themselves that will be used during the trick. David and Michael move toward a steel platform elevated above the audience. The platform is thin, allowing people to see underneath it at all times. A large mirror is positioned behind them so that nothing can enter or leave without being seen. David then drops the curtains and waves a light bulb inside to show his presence. Suddenly, the curtain is pulled back and both of them vanish. The focus then shifts to the beach in Hawaii. The live camera feed shows, without any apparent cuts or interruptions, David and Michael appearing from inside a curtain. Michael runs to the water and can even be seen submerged in it. David pulls his cuffs up to show the initials on his arm match perfectly. When Michael pulls out the Polaroid picture, still bearing the signatures from the audience members, and shows it to the camera. Michael is then seen meeting with his father, and the act ends with David vanishing from the beach and reappearing back in the theater as Rain from Hawaii seemingly teleports with him. Now, let's get some facts straight. We know that if David Copperfield simply vanished and appeared on the beach without any evidence, we would immediately suspect them of hiding after the vanish. While pre-recorded footage played in the live feed, it's the signed Polaroid and the initials that give credibility to our belief in this seemingly impossible event. So our main concern is whether the proof presented to us is legitimate. And surprisingly, the proof is undeniably genuine. A careful analysis of T.S.'s initials on the beach and on stage reveals that they are exactly the same, with the thickness of the letters being extremely precise. Furthermore, the signed Polaroid contains the exact same initials of Amber, and the image in the Polaroid matches perfectly. If the proof hasn't been manipulated, our suspicions naturally turn to the other elements involved, such as the live feed shown on the screen, the randomly selected volunteers, and even Michael. One thing is certain: we can't place Michael and the other volunteers selected with the frisbee and ball in the same category. This is because Michael was the one who vanished with David Copperfield from the platform, and that vanish couldn't have happened without Michael's knowledge. Secondly, Michael was pre-selected before the show, unlike the other volunteers. Of course, Michael and David didn't actually vanish. They would have had to escape the platform in one of several ways. They couldn't escape from the bottom, the top, or the side, as everything is in full view the moment the vanish occurs. Even without knowing the technical details, one could reasonably conclude that they escaped back across the very platform they were standing on. After escaping the platform, they had to go somewhere else. For a trick that has been around for more than 2 decades, it's no surprise that numerous theories already exist about how it could have been done. Keep in mind, the explanation we're looking for has to be the most practical and logical, because this wasn't the first or last time he performed this trick. David actually repeated this trick in multiple locations during his live shows. Therefore, to reduce the chances of failure, he would have had to design the trick with as few variables as possible to control. So, if anyone is jumping to the conclusion that everyone in the theatre was in on the trick, then David Copperfield would have only performed it once. Like the Statue of Liberty vanish. Instead, this particular trick was part of his live shows for years. Was this live feed pre-recorded footage? A popular theory suggests that everything was pre-recorded and using tracking. The signed Polaroid was copied when his assistants handled the Polaroid at this moment, while the TS initials were extracted and placed on the pre-recorded footage. In the pre-recorded footage, the photo David Copperfield showed to the camera was a blank image. The initials on his arm were also tracked using live video editing. Using this method would mean the volunteers can be truly random selections. However, problems arise when we get into the technical aspects of this theory and consider its practicality. Pay close attention to the initials. Notice that as he rotates his arm slightly clockwise, the initials move perfectly synchronized with his skin, and the top curve of the letter S becomes thin as his finger stretches the skin. The technology required to track initials with precise detail, ensuring the letters stretched naturally with the skin, was extremely challenging through post-editing and impossible to achieve during a live feed. Tracking techniques at the time involved manual keyframing with early tracking software, which could handle simple motion but struggled with complex deformations like skin stretching. Additionally, camera resolution was less advanced, making efficient tracking difficult. The Polaroid handed to David already shows the image visible enough as it gets zoomed in on by the camera. At no point do we see any misalignment of the photo inside the Polaroid with the outer white border, nor the floating of Amber's name as David Copperfield's hand shakes the entire time. Furthermore, video compression reduced the effective resolution during live broadcasts. Skin was necessary to manage bandwidth, but also resulted in a loss of fine details, making it even more challenging to track small, subtle movements like skin stretching in real time. But what about using green screen or chroma keying? If a portion of Copperfield's arm were painted green, the VFX team could theoretically overlay the initials. However, this process would only place the image on top of the green surface, without accounting for the stretching or movement of the skin. As the skin stretches, the initials wouldn't stretch with it. Instead, the initials would remain static, making it look like it was simply hovering over the arm without being part of the skin. Additionally, when the arm moved, the edges of the initials would likely become misaligned, leading to sections of the initials being cut off. Even advanced tracking methods that handled deformable surfaces, such as mesh tracking, did not exist in a practical form in 2001. Eliminating the use of tracking or chroma keying means the pre-recorded footage is not tampered with in any way. Are these participants stooges? This means the evidence had to be duplicated on stage, which could only be done if these seemingly freely selected participants were stooges. Certain suspicions about how this trick was filmed support this theory, leading people to believe this was the method used. A video published around 14 years ago suggests that, with some rehearsal, David Copperfield could have easily thrown the ball over his shoulder to land exactly where he wanted, or had several accomplices sitting in the front row. If Copperfield intentionally threw it to the first accomplice, the remaining selection could be manipulated relatively easily, as they wouldn't need to toss the ball over their shoulder. Now, although this method hasn't been mentioned before, David could have also used multiple pre-recorded footages. For instance, if one of the accomplices didn't successfully toss the ball the correct distance, or someone else caught it, a different pre-recorded clip could be used to maintain the illusion. So if another group caught the ball, there could be 4 different people in the pre-recorded footage, with only the Polaroid duplicated, while the initials remained TS. This is because the initials could represent anyone's name, whether male or female. After taking the photo, the assistant could switch it out with the original Polaroid that was used in the pre-recorded footage. Isn't it suspicious that one of the most crucial aspects of the trick, the signing of the Polaroid, which would allow us to double-check with screenshots, did not clearly show her writing her name? Regarding the initials written on David Copperfield's arm, some may suggest that since he is only writing 2 letters, he could easily replicate them with enough practice. However, the thickness of the initials and the exact location on Copperfield's arm are far too precise to be considered a replication. Unless, of course, the initials from the pre-recorded footage were always on Copperfield's arm. In other words, the close-up shot of him writing is just an illusion. Similar to how tattoos can be hidden with makeup, the initials on his arm could have been concealed in the same way. When we see TS writing on his arm, we don't actually see the tip of the marker contacting his skin, so we may only be assuming the marker works like a normal one. This convinces many that the marker had special liquid compounds inside, such that it acted as a makeup remover with a black-colored foam tip that released liquid once it contacted Copperfield's skin. But there's a major flaw with this theory, the first being that many attendees of his live performances have suggested that they were selected and even participated, so either they wrote their initials on David Copperfield's arm, or had themselves or their kid draw on the board. Secondly, the proof of Stooges being used is more of an assumption than hard evidence. The throws just so happened to be perfect enough to select the Stooges, while at the same time, one of the random participants, who was a child, just so happened to perfectly replicate the letter J twice. If Stooges were used, it wasn't smart to choose a child. This complicates the possibility of a replication. We can expect an adult with a lot of practice to somewhat replicate a drawing, but having a child do it on stage makes it highly unlikely that he was a stooge. Therefore, we have no choice but to accept that the initials in the signed Polaroid shown in Hawaii are indeed the exact same ones we saw on stage, with no replication happening at any point. So, are they really at a beach and everything was live? Since we aim for the most practical and reliable solution, we need to minimize the variables. No green screen, tracking, stooges, or replication can be considered a practical method. Some of you may suggest, since there was a lapse of 15 seconds from the time they vanished until they appeared on the beach, the theater could have been near a beach that was made to look like Hawaii. But this would be the last thing Copperfield would do, because everyone in the theater would know about it. Secondly, this trick was performed in Memphis, Tennessee, and Hawaii is 4,000 kilometers away. This beach is in Gulf Shores, Alabama, which is about a 6-hour drive away, roughly 360 miles. This means he would have to arrange an alternative as a realistic but artificial beach built backstage or under the theater, with artificial waves, sand, water, and a realistic-looking sky. The waves could be artificially created, and real palm trees and sand could be used. Since the clouds are seen moving, the sky would need to be a rear projection screen. This involves projecting an image onto a translucent screen, and works best for large-scale or out-of-focus elements like skies, mountains, or skyscrapers, where fine detail isn't expected. The human brain doesn't expect to see fine details in distant objects, so this wouldn't require a green screen. While this explanation works theoretically, practically the setup would be extremely complex and need to be well engineered to look realistic. It would also be incredibly costly. Yes, David Copperfield has great fortune, but producing an artificial beach for every stage he performed at, since he didn't just perform this in one theater, would be madness. Transporting all this for every performance would be impractical. And yes, we know he doesn't show a full 360-degree view of the beach they are in, but to put any doubts about its practicality to rest, just consider the scale of the beach. When Michael walks up to the shore, the beach's size becomes clear in relation to him, meaning they either are on a real beach or it's pre-recorded footage, putting us back in a logical loop again. What is the one missing puzzle piece that we keep overlooking? Here is the secret. To understand the secret behind this complex illusion and how the live feed is filmed, let's zoom out and view it from the filming crew's perspective. Yes, this entire thing was done in front of a green screen. They were filming it live. But wait a minute, where's Michael and David Copperfield? The live feed initially shows a pre-recorded footage of them appearing on the beach. Once Michael comes running back from the tide, David goes out of frame and remains away. Then you'll notice the camera zooming out. During the zoomed-out moment, the real David Copperfield steps in front of the camera, and the cameraman ensures no overlap happens with the pre-recorded Michael. The moment they zoom in on David Copperfield's arm, David shows the original initials, and at this moment, the pre-recorded Michael moves away, and the real Michael stands in the exact same position, turns towards his right, pulls out the signed Polaroid, which David also shows as the camera zooms in. Since interaction is still happening between both of them, the pre-recorded Michael has not entered the pre-recorded footage yet. But right when the camera zooms in and moves slightly to the right, Michael is ready to jump out of frame alongside with David Copperfield, who has already moved to the right. And the pre-recorded footage shows Michael's dad walking, and the pre-recorded Michael appears. Now everything you see is pre-recorded. Even the moment David Copperfield hides in the curtain and vanishes. Now let's get into the technical details of how the pre-recorded footage was filmed. During the transition between the real and pre-recorded footage, the pre-recorded camera must remain extremely stable, with no zooming in. The zoom-in we see showing the signed Polaroid and David Copperfield's initials is done by the live feed camera. In contrast, when David and Michael are not in the frame, the pre-recorded camera can zoom in and out freely, which explains the shakiness only in those portions showing pre-recorded footage. Furthermore, you will notice that when the real David Copperfield and Michael appear, their full body is never shown, further proving this method to be accurate. The pre-recorded footage of them appearing on the beach and Michael walking into the tides could have been filmed in Hawaii or at a similar beach. They didn't need a full 360-degree view, limiting the pre-recorded video to around 150 to 160 degrees of field of view. Now, some may suggest that a green screen wasn't used. Instead, the live feed was showing a rear projection. But here's the problem with that. Green screens provide clearer images without brightness or distortion issues, which are common with rear projection. Proper lighting ensures a clean chroma key effect, whereas rear projection can struggle with ambient light. Green screens also seamlessly integrate real-time graphics, making them ideal for dynamic productions. In contrast, rear projection can face image distortions like keystoning and poor color accuracy. David Copperfield's team needs accessibility to synchronize the live feed video with his vanish. A key giveaway of the green screen usage is the timer, which can be manipulated on the screen. Michael is about to run to the beach in the live feed. The timer vanishes, further indicating the use of green screen. Furthermore, David is known to use the latest technology, so it wouldn't make sense for him to use rear projection, which was considered outdated at the time. Professional film production had already shifted towards green screens by then. In fact, green screens were already popular and widely used for live footage, particularly in weather forecasting in the United States during the 1970s. 30 years before this trick was performed, one theory suggests the first part of the live feed in Hawaii was shown live, while the rest was pre-recorded, based on the changing shadows on the sand. Initially, strong shadows are visible, but later they disappear. However, this theory is flawed, as the large clouds visible in the sky could easily block the sunlight, causing shadows to disappear temporarily. A more logical analysis would focus on the shadow length, not their disappearance, to detect inconsistencies between live and pre-recorded footage. While the pre-recorded footage has a fixed length, the portion where Copperfield's assistant is waiting for the vanish can be slowed down without noticeable differences, as there is no significant movement. Once the vanish occurs, the footage can return to normal speed to sync with the live event. Even if there's a slight delay in syncing, it's negligible. The appearing using the curtains on the beach didn't require them to actually go inside before their appearance. They were simply hiding in a large hole dug on the beach, allowing them to emerge when the timing was right. The hole allows them to crouch, such that the height of their head aligns with the ground level. They don't actually have to be full body length deep, otherwise it would be difficult to instantly climb out. Being in the crouched position, they only need to stand up as the curtain moves up and step forward towards the camera, leaving the hole hidden behind them. This video suggests a long mirror placed horizontally on one side of the beach to act as cover for crawling. But using mirrors is illogical. The beach illustration omits key details, like palm trees and assistants visible in the live feed. For mirrors to work, the camera must be stationary, yet it moves the entire time. Additionally, mirrors block what's behind them, so a mirror on the right side would obscure trees and reflect the assistants lifting the curtain. Thus, mirrors don't make sense. Another idea is the use of invisible wires from above, but since we can clearly see the top of the setup, entry or exit from the top is impossible. Walking up from behind the beach is also unrealistic, as the full view is visible and they couldn't cover such a long distance in the short time while the curtain is raised. Any attempt to enter from the sides would be exposed. What further reveals the existence of a hole underground is the camera zooming in right after Copperfield's vanish. Notice that the curtain isn't removed until the camera zooms in. If it were shown without the zoom, the hole would be clearly visible. By zooming in and tilting slightly to the left as the curtain is moved aside, they cleverly hide the hole, which is on the right side of the screen, using misdirection. Now let's tackle the most intriguing part of the illusion. The platform vanished. How was it executed so flawlessly? We know the platform is 2 inches thick, with a convex mirror providing views from both front and back. Metal cables are attached to 2 pillars in a suspension bridge style. After the curtains dropped, 15 seconds passed before a siren sounded and they both vanished. There is definitely no camera trickery involved, as that wouldn't explain his live shows. The only way they could have exited the platform was along this path, but they couldn't have walked out while the curtain was over them. Suspiciously, instead of filming from the side like moments before, the camera switched to a front view. Additionally, you will also notice sparklers completely obscuring the path the curtain took. However, throughout the vanish, the path from where they stood to the pillars remained in plain view, only blocked when the curtain was pulled away. Now think about it. Why didn't David Copperfield just drop the curtains, like in his Great Wall of China illusion? The vanish would have been just as impressive, if not more impossible. In that illusion, when the curtains dropped, he hid inside the base of the platform. Looking at the platform David and Michael stood on, there's a small gap that could theoretically hide them only if they were toddlers, because the upper half of their body would still be visible. The mirrors were used to reflect the circular lights, creating the illusion of transparency. However, you can clearly see the curtain and the sparklers straight through the platform from the front. So this explains why the curtains didn't drop, because they simply didn't hide inside the base of this platform as a temporary stay. As the explanation leads to nowhere once they hide inside, the curtain was the only thing covering them. Once it was removed, they had no way of escaping. One theory suggests the bridge has elastic material that stretches to accommodate David and Michael, with wires pulling them through. However, this theory falls apart because there's no visible bump or lump as the curtain exits. While some might argue that the black material hides the bump, this only makes sense from a top view. But here we're seeing at platform level, and even using slow motion, nothing is visible. Take a moment to consider the size of David and Michael. They are fully grown adults. If they were to pass horizontally, the bulge would be large and easily noticeable even from a distance. We are viewing from an ideal angle to detect any such distortion, yet nothing appears. At this point, it's clear they were pulled away with the curtain. In fact, for a brief moment, we catch a glimpse of someone's head in a horizontal position. But wouldn't the suspension wires interfere with this movement? Here we get a clearer view showing that the suspension wires aren't actually in the path of the exit across the bridge. The thinness of the platform reveals the moment any sudden movement occurs. You can see the platform move upwards as the weight of both adults is removed, right when the cloth is pulled back. This clearly shows they were pulled away with the curtain. Being pulled away with the curtain means they had to be carried along a straight path without being whipped into one of the pillars, which would happen if only one wire was used, even if it was perfectly centered through the support pillars. A sudden jerk and momentum would likely cause them to collide with the pillars, which clearly isn't a risk worth taking. Now the curtain is, relatively, at a small height above the surface, and we notice the head of one of them in this moment, which means they were being carried horizontally. This means a method that is extremely safe has to be used, allowing even actors to perform it instead of relying on stunt doubles in movies. In Men in Black International, a menacing alien tosses the agent down a staircase. To achieve this violent-looking motion, filmmakers use a trick called a ratchet pull. During a ratchet pull, a performer is tied to cables powered by an air pressure cylinder, which pulls them either backwards, forwards, or upwards. The more pressure you use, the farther they'll go. You can see the 3 wires carrying him above ground level and decelerated before impact. A very similar mechanism was used for the vanish. Instead of wearing harnesses while the curtain was covered, they already were wearing them underneath their clothing. Then, as soon as the curtain dropped, David Copperfield reached for the light to wave around, while Michael connected the hook with him and David. This explains why the light bulb was moving behind the curtain till the very last moment the curtain was pulled. They didn't escape before the curtain pulled, neither after, but right under the cover of the curtain when it was removed. If you look closely, right over here, you'll notice 2 white-colored plastic wheels. These wheels are actually rollers for the vertical metal beams to slide against and move, and open up to give space, while the entire cage is covered up with the curtain. This method ensures both of them went along a straight path, as all 3 wires are connected for 2-dimensional motion. But this still raises a concern about whether being pulled with wires at such a speed is even safe. To understand this, we need to calculate the g-force. The key variables are acceleration and gravity. To calculate acceleration, we need the distance David Copperfield traveled along the platform and the time it took. The approximate distance can be estimated by getting a side view of the platform and using David Copperfield's estimated height in 2001 to measure his height relative to the platform length for a rough calculation. The length of the path they traveled is approximately 24 feet, or 7.32 meters, and the time was 0.75 seconds, resulting in a g-force of 2.65 g, similar to roller coaster forces. This g-force is safe for short durations, being 3.4 times less than the potentially fatal 9g. It's important to note that g-force is independent of Copperfield and Michael's weight. Since both were pulled together, they experienced the same force because they underwent the same acceleration with the same wires. To enhance safety, an airbag could be placed at their landing spot, where they immediately detach from the wires and enter a green screen studio. There they would perform the rehearsed portions of the trick with real-time evidence from the theatre. Behind this mask, only the truth remains till we meet again.